Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Rez, and I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar on optimizing governance for SharePoint and Teams. Especially with AI becoming more centric in our corporate world, we thought we would remind everyone why having structured governance is more important than ever right now. And without thinking of this structured governance and with the emergence of the larger dependence on AI and Copilot, organizations are going to face this data chaos, these security risks, these compliance challenges if we don't address it. And today, we're going to explore some key strategies to manage data in SharePoint and Teams as really a precursor of what you should be thinking of. We'll also highlight Microsoft 365 and a great third-party tool that can help you automate many of the governance aspects we're going to talk about today. By the end of this session, you're going to understand how governance leads to better collaboration, security, and AI efficiency. So let's get started. So let me first start out by telling you a bit about our hosts for today's webinar, my company, Creospark. We're a team of Microsoft 365 implementation experts, really passionate about helping organizations and our clients achieve their ideal employee experience. We specialize on workplace productivity when it comes to Microsoft 365, which includes SharePoint and Teams, obviously, and we have headquarters in both Davis, California, and Toronto, Canada. Our main solution areas are modern work, where we help organizations work from anywhere on any device, exactly the way you want. Think about services in Microsoft like SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive and Viva, and obviously Copilot. So we help organizations help them deploy Copilot, readiness assessments. We help them deploy intranets and extranets and portals, document management systems, and we integrate with all of their internal systems. Our second solution area is process transformations, where we help organizations of any size go digital at their own pace. We help them automate their business processes. We help them digitize their forms, and we help support transforming those repetitive tasks using tools like Copilot and AI. And then lastly, our secured cloud solution area. Well, this aims to really secure the cloud. We take security, compliance, identity, and device management seriously. And we want to make sure your teams are in the know for today's environment. And we use all of the security and compliance tools around the Microsoft 365 platform, like Purview, Defender, and all the rest of them. Some of them you're going to hear about today, such as Entra and SharePoint Advanced Management. Our focus is really on leveraging Microsoft technologies, including Microsoft 365, Copilot, Power Platform, Dynamics, SharePoint Teams, and Azure to facilitate helping you meet your desired business outcomes. All right, for housekeeping, we want to keep it open. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the chat. We'll probably reserve answering them at the end of this webinar. We're going to give handouts and certificates for some attendees. A lot of people have been asking for that lately after today's webinar session. And you'll also receive the recording itself and a recap in our blog in a week or so. We also plan on doing a cool, nice webinar giveaway at the end of this session. So make sure you stay for the full session. So what's today's agenda all about? Today's webinar really focuses on governance best practices for SharePoint and Teams. We're talking about security, compliance, and AI optimization. We want to get you armed with the ability to future-proof your digital workspace. So we'll first explore some best practices for structuring SharePoint and Teams. And honestly, these best practices haven't changed for years, but if you listen to some of them, you'll ensure that seamless collaboration and that AI readiness you want before deploying tools like Copilot. Next, we're going to dive into some of the security and compliance strategies to safeguard data and enhance some of your AI-driven insights. And finally, we'll learn about future-proofing your digital workspace. And here we're going to get some insights from Joy from Orchestry. And we're going to introduce Joy in a second on improving your governance and compliance. So that brings us to the introduction. So before I carry on, I want to introduce myself and the speakers for the day. My name is Nerez Kamis. Everybody calls me Rez. I'm CTO here at Creospark, also a Microsoft MVP, and I've been helping organizations understand the importance of ensuring governance in their Microsoft solutions for many, many years. So maybe I'll pass it off to Carolyn to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn Jurdy. I'm the Technical Analyst Team Lead here at Creospark. I work with organizations to optimize their Microsoft 365 environments, really work on streamlining collaboration, and help implement effective governance strategies. Pass it over to Joy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolyn. Joy Apple, Director of Success for Orchestra Software. But I've had the pleasure of working with Microsoft products and technologies for about 17 years now, really focusing on modern work for the last 8. And I will say I'm excited for today's conversation because governance, as we all know, it's so critical to move forward successfully. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. Well, before we dive in, let's take a quick pulse check. We all know that governance policies are crucial for security, compliance, and efficient collaboration in Microsoft 365. But we know that every organization is at a different stage. So let us know where your organization stands today. Let's see where we're at, and I'm going to answer myself to see where we're at. So we see the third option of no, but we're planning to implement one, being pretty high. We'll give it another 20 seconds. Got quite a few attendees in today's webinars. Pretty good on the response rate. So good. Really, what we're seeing here is that does your organization have a governance policy in place for SharePoint and Teams? And it's really C, where we're at, and B, just caught up. Yes, but it's outdated or inconsistently followed. So many of you guys can probably relate to where we're at. And hopefully in today's webinar, we can give you some guidance to get you to A. And that's where we all really want to be at. Okay, so why are we here today? And really, we often think of governance as a set of rules and policies, but at its core, it's about creating a framework that allows organizations to make those best decisions. And we want them to make these decisions in a consistent manner, in a secure manner, and we want them to be very efficient when they're with these decisions. And whether or not your organization is implementing AI today, having that strong governance in SharePoint and Teams, and in fact, across the entire Microsoft 365 experience, it can ensure that your collaboration, your document management, your compliance, your meetings, callings, and chat, and security and compliance are all built into your daily operations. And it's not just about those one-time decisions, it's about setting up those right processes that are going to serve your organization right now and in the future. So in this first part of today's webinar, we're really going to dig into understanding why governing your SharePoint and Teams are so important. But quickly, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Creospark methodology and our approach, or our kind of a secret sauce. We've done this for dozens of organizations already on that kind of journey to AI, and we've done it for hundreds of organizations over our lifetime of helping them understand governance, even before AI was a thing, because all of these governance aspects touched every aspect of their Microsoft 365 rollout. So we've broken down this webinar into the phases of our methodology. First, we'll start with the envisioning stage and envisioning the organization's unique objective and desired outcomes by gathering information from stakeholders, end users, and the experts in your organization. And we do this and we cater this to how your organization works. We do it how your organization collaborates, store documents, shares documents, and secures everything yourself with any compliance regulations they have. We understand that every organization is different, and this envision phase, helps us and you understand, how you desire to work with AI and what your current pain points with your data is. And we ensure that we understand what a successful outcome is for your organization. And then lastly, we want to make sure that once we understand your outcome, how do we measure it? As an example, with AI, are people finding what they're looking for quicker? Is it better than search? Is it providing reliable results? How much time is it saving them, right? So next, from a defined standpoint, we translate those objectives into tangible goals. We assemble project plans and your requirements and your desired outcomes. Sometimes we do a little bit of one-on-one training here on tech like Copilot and ways that SharePoint and Teams work, and even some of the content AI services as part of SharePoint Premium. We then go to our blueprint phase where we architect, design, prototype, and create those proof of concepts to bring that plat for life. And this is where the lifecycle management and compliance comes in from a governance perspective. Next, we go and implement that AI-ready governance, right? Where we implement, test, deploy, run proof of concepts, run pilots, and we ensure that it meets the end user functionality that at least the pilot department is looking for before we roll it out to the entire organization. Lastly, we ensure that all of that necessary governance aspects are, number one, documented, understood, and future-proofing it, right? And ensuring that ever evolution and that continuous governance, both from a reference perspective, but also a proactive technical configuration, alerting, reporting, and in place with that constant adoption, change management, and training. And this is where tools like what we're going to be talking about today from Orchestrate can really help. So our first stage is really understanding the governance imperative as part of Envision. And I'm going to be passing it off to Carolyn to give a little bit of insights to that.
Yeah, so let's look at two companies. Both are growing fast. Both are using Microsoft 365. But they took very different approaches to governance. On the left, we have company A. They implemented a clear governance framework for SharePoint and Teams. These are clearly identified with the employees, and they know what the purposes are and who has access to files and sites. Here, the employees can easily find what they need. AI will enhance collaboration, and security risks are minimized. And then on the right, we have company B. No governance, no structures. Files are everywhere. Maybe they migrated to Microsoft Teams and SharePoint sites in a like-for-like manner from their old file shares, where permissions might have been unclear. There could be duplicate copies of documents. Versions are labeled with the suffix of /date or v1, v2, or the dreaded final, really final type of files. Here, AI tools struggle to provide meaningful insights. They can't figure out the right source of information, possibly showing sensitive information. And with that, there comes wasted time, compliance risks, and frustrated employees. So every organization, and lots of organizations are somewhere in between. This is showing the two extremes. But every organization reaches this fork into the road. And the question is, which path will you take? So as organizations grow, the lack of governance in SharePoint and Teams leads to inefficiencies, security risks, and compliance challenges. But with AI now part of Microsoft 365, poor governance can also result in unreliable AI insights and data risks. So without clear governance, Microsoft 365 enables unchecked site and team creation, orphan sites, duplicate files, and poor document management becomes common, leading to confusion and inefficiency. There's also security and compliance risks. When files are overshared, both internally and externally, without proper insight, Copilot makes it even easier to surface sensitive data. Like we've heard about this over and over, HR, financial information, that was never meant to be broadly accessible. So a lot of organizations ask, who has access to what? And yet many lack a clear answer. Deploying sensitivity labels and structured governance can mitigate the risks and can help ensure employees feel confident about where to store data. Our migrations show that 50 to 80% of data should not be moved, yet old unnecessary files often remain active, helping to create compliance risks. Keeping outdated data is a liability and not an asset. And then finally, governance gaps equals poor collaboration. So without governance, Employees struggle to find the right files, and AI can't function effectively on unstructured, fragmented data. Governance isn't just about security, it's about enabling smarter collaboration and AI-driven productivity. So AI and governance are deeply connected. AI, it definitely doesn't replace governance. It amplifies its importance. Without structure, AI pulls from unstructured, outdated, or unsecured data and creates compliance risks and mistrusts. AI is only as good as your governance. Poor governance leads to improper data exposure and security risks. But structured governance enhances AI-driven insights. When you include metadata, tagging, permissions, AI surfaces the right information instead of those outdated files. AI will follow governance rules. It doesn't override them. So without clear policies, AI may expose sensitive data. But strong governance transforms AI into a powerful tool for security, automation, and productivity.
Okay, great. Carolyn, thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about within setting governance foundations in our define phase. So governance is often seen as this set of restrictive rules, and it leads to data sprawl, security risk, and compliance failures. But in reality, what it is, it's what keeps collaboration structured, secured, and efficient. The challenge is that governance isn't that one-time decision. It really evolves as the organization grows. If it's too restrictive, users are going to find workarounds and leading to that shadow IT. You know, how many people at your organizations are using ChatGPT and you not knowing it? If it's too open, you risk data sprawl and compliance issues. Governance planning should really start when you're conceiving your information architecture, when you're organizing your Microsoft 365, when you're coming up with that metadata, your library structure, your team structure, your channel structure, you name it, and including the way you are structuring your SharePoint and Teams environments holistically. The key is really finding a governance framework that enables collaboration while maintaining security and compliance. And that's what we're really here to explore. Every organization needs governance, but there is no universal template. It's catered to the way your organization works. Starting from when you first migrated your data and when you first created a site or a team to when you're archiving your data. Policies around site creation, permissions, and data classification need to align with how your teams work. Otherwise, they get ignored and become bottlenecks. We're going to walk through some key governance areas, and the most effective policies are those as part of these governance areas and policies that are thoughtfully designed, that are adaptable and structured in a way that support both security and productivities. Here you're going to see some must-haves for governance for your SharePoint and Teams, and what you should include. And what you see here are their essential policies to reduce that risk and improve your structure. So things like site and teams creation policies. Who can create these new sites and teams? How are they named? Does your organization have that little create teams button at the bottom? You know, how many people are creating teams and duplicate teams and just leaving them without an archiving strategy? How do we know what the security level of that? How do we know if that team is meant for internal or external collaboration? Do you have a prefix or a suffix in it? All these types of rules you should think about before enabling that little create teams button in your organization or that create site button in your organization. There's permissions and role-based access as well. Who owns sites? Who can edit and view files? You know, do you have your permissions aligned with your Entra ID structure? Are they dynamic groups? Do you have to manually maintain who's being added to teams? How do we know when somebody moves department and they're not supposed to have access to those teams? There's a lot of different what we call permissions and role-based access controls you should be thinking about. Data classification and sensitivity labels. You know, have you identified what's public, what's internal, what's confidential, what's highly confidential, what's top secret? You know, do you have a classification structure for that? Have you defined your sensitivity labels in Purview? There's also external sharing and guest access controls. Who can share within your environment? What's allowed to be shared? Is it based on your sensitivity labels that you've hopefully applied to your teams and your containers? And what about these lifecycle policies? What happens to your inactive teams and sites once you're done with them? And what are your retention and archival rules? You might have some compliance you might need to have where you're keeping your data for 7 years and then you need to dispose of it. Keeping that data is probably way worse from a compliance perspective than having it there for reference just in case you need for a variety of reasons we're going to be talking about throughout this presentation. Now, governance is more than the policies that you're going to see on paper. It's about ensuring they're applied effectively. A common challenge we're seeing is striking that right balance. Too many restrictions and users bypass the system, and too few controls, and the data security suffers. And governance isn't also static. It requires that continuous oversight and refinement as technology, compliance, and your business needs evolve. The most successful organizations treat governance as this ongoing strategy, not just a one-time setup. However, if you have too rigid rules, users are going to work around the policies, but if they're too flexible, you're going to be exposed to compliance and security risks. And if there's no enforcements, policies are ignored, right? And this is the hard part, and this is where we help your organization understand that balance of those three aspects. And governance really needs to be continuously monitored, continuously adjusted, and with that expert strategy behind it, based on how your organization really works. Now that we've heard some of the setting up governance foundations and understanding why governance is important, let's talk about lifecycle management. I'm going to pass it back off to Carolyn here.
Yeah, so effective data lifecycle management is the foundation of governance. It ensures that content stays relevant, secure, and compliant without creating unnecessary clutter. By embedding lifecycle governance into daily workflows, organizations create a more secure, efficient, and AI-ready digital workspace. So let's take a look at the Microsoft 365 tools for lifecycle management. The next slide. It's extremely important for organizations that use Microsoft 365 understand and know the robust tools available to them to streamline lifecycle management within their licensing. So SharePoint Advanced Management automates site governance and has powerful capabilities designed to manage content lifecycle, secure access, and ensure compliance. It includes automated policies for site lifecycle management, such as managing inactive sites and site ownership policies. It also offers AI insights to identify patterns and potential issues from reporting, providing actionable recommendations. Additionally, SAM, it's kind of abbreviated to, includes features to control access, manage permissions, and secure data. The best thing about SAM is that it's now, as of this year, organizations with Copilot licensing will have access to these features. Microsoft Purview enforces data retention and protection policies, and Microsoft Entra manages user identities and access throughout the tenant. Retention and information protection are essential for governance and security. Microsoft Purview automates retention schedules, ensuring compliance and reducing manual oversight. Sensitivity labels add an extra layer of security by classifying data, and Copilot respects these labels, preventing unauthorized access and reducing exposure risks. So some key Microsoft Purview capabilities include data security. It protects sensitive information with data loss prevention, security posture management, and insider risk management. Data governance, data maps, and unified catalogs help classify, secure, and manage data across SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, and Exchange. Then also it helps with risk and compliance. It can automate regulatory compliance, audit, and e-discovery, making legal and security investigations more efficient. By implementing strong retention and security policies, organizations mitigate risk, improve compliance, and ensure AI-driven tools like Copilot work securely and effectively.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, yeah, the lifecycle management is such an important aspect on the governance side of the equation. So let's move on to build, where we're talking about some tips on implementing that AI-ready governance. AI in Microsoft 365 is only as good as the data it can access. If your SharePoint and team environments lack that structured governance, AI may pull that incorrect, outdated, or even unauthorized data. Even though we use generative AI, it really doesn't truly create the data. It relies on that structured, well-managed information to combine that data in different accessible data sources. AI really thrives on that clear metadata, that permission, and the data security policies. And without governance, AI surfaces, and we've talked about it already, duplicate data, outdated data, misclassified data, and documents. And it could possibly expose that sensitive information if the permissions are not configured. And employing a well thought out governance framework ensures that AI works with that accurate, relevant, and secure information because you have that well thought out governance framework. And what this does, it makes your AI investments more valuable and trustworthy, and avoiding that garbage in, garbage out kind of mentality that we're all trying to avoid with governance, by employing governance. Now, for AI to provide that important, relevant insights your employees are looking for, it needs that properly labeled and structured data. By implementing consistent metadata, well-defined security policies, clear classification labels, organizations can ensure that the AI recommendations that are given are accurate, secure, and useful for your business decision-making. And in the end, provide a more productive environment for your employees, saving their time and saving your organization money. Now, some key governance best practices for AI readiness include things like starting with a well-conceived information architecture, which includes proper metadata and tagging standards, and defining your teams, defining your channels, defining the security of your channels and your sites and your libraries. AI really understands content better when files, sites, and teams have that consistent metadata and labels assigned to them. Next, properly plan out your security and permissions frameworks. AI tools must respect access levels to prevent that data exposure. Ensure all of your containers, such as groups, your teams, your channels, your sites, your libraries, and folders, have the appropriate security applied to them. And make sure it's easily and ideally automatically maintained for you, so you don't have to manually maintain that security. For example, you could use dynamic Entra ID groups on your Azure Active Directory, as it formerly was called, groups, and have it automatically create these groups from data and user profile data in your HR system. And that's all possible nowadays, and we do it for many of our clients. So IT is not getting those help desk tickets that this person moved department, so we have to move them. And lastly, use those data classification policies. You can imagine how many companies don't even know they have access to this capability with their existing Microsoft 365 licensing and subscriptions. Sensitivity labels in Purview ensure AI knows what's public versus confidential, and different kind of classifications that are relevant to your organization. Now, strong governance doesn't just help AI, it enables AI to improve governance itself. With automation, AI can classify content, can recommend security actions, and even flag compliance risks in real time. The right governance framework really makes AI smarter and more proactive in maintaining that secure and efficient workspace that you're looking for, from your sites to your teams to across your entire Microsoft 365 environment. Some AI-powered governance use cases include automated content classification. AI can auto-tag your documents based on governance policies. This capability is seen in many areas in Microsoft 365, such as SharePoint list and library metadata defaults. SharePoint Premium content tagging services, SharePoint Advanced Management Policies, and you can see this all over Purview from what Carolyn talked about earlier. You also have AI-enhanced search and recommendations. This well-structured governance makes the AI retrieval of your content, your documents, and your data smarter. What is happening with AI is that it's making search even easier. No more doing a search and going through search result pages anymore. Now, it's all based on your prompt. Copilot, it's guessing, and based on how your governance is, on what it thinks is the best answers to give you. And then next, you have AI compliance monitor. AI really assists in identifying those security risks and policy violations. And a lot of these aspects can be seen and configured in Purview. Great. So now that we've kind of seen the different stages of from envision to define to blueprint to build, understanding how important governance is, setting governance foundations, lifecycle management, and implementing AI readiness, let's close it off with how do you maintain it? What is that future-proofing for AI looks like, and what is that compliance evolution? And back to you, Carolyn.
Yeah, and I think that maintain is probably one of the most important stages because governance is only effective if people follow it. By embedding governance into workflows, reinforcing best practices through training, and continuously measuring policy effectiveness, organizations can maintain compliance without slowing down collaboration. And then governance isn't set it and forget it, like we just mentioned. As AI evolves and compliance rules change, organizations need to regularly refine their governance approach. So why continuous optimization matters? AI is getting smarter. Copilot and other tools interact with more data that makes structured governance critical. Compliance rules shift. New laws may require updates to retention and security policies. And of course, business needs change over time. Mergers, cloud adoption, remote work are just examples of how this impacts governance requirements. So for some key steps for ongoing governance, you can implement regular audits to spot security risks before AI amplifies them, policy updates to keep up with compliance changes, retention reviews to clean up outdated data and reduce risk, user guidance and training to ensure teams follow governance best practices. And by continuously improving governance, organizations can stay secure, compliant, and AI ready without adding unnecessary complexity. So AI will continue to evolve and compliance requirements will shift. Organizations that prepare for change will maintain security and efficiency. The key is monitoring AI capabilities, staying informed on compliance updates, and using the Microsoft 365 tools to adapt dynamically.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, so that's kind of our concept of how we handle governance as part of our implementation methodology here at Creospark, and all of the aspects where we include governance within the different phases. So we've covered why governance is really the foundation for AI success in Microsoft 365. But we also know governance isn't just about having policies. It's about making it work seamlessly for your tools. And all of the tools that we've referenced, such as Purview, SAM or SharePoint Advanced Management, Entra ID, internal and guest management, archiving and backups, Teams and SharePoint provisioning and administrations are all fairly large concepts to understand themselves. And that's where Orchestry really comes in, and it kind of addresses across all of these different governance aspects across the phases of our methodology. And I'm excited to hand it over to Joy Apple, who's going to share how organizations can simplify that governance execution while empowering users. So over to you, Joy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rez. Yes, I would say in a perfect world, I'm going to talk a little bit while I start sharing my screen. In a perfect world, governance is something that is cradle to grave. And I think we can all agree with that statement. But where it gets a little difficult is figuring out where to start. And again, like I put in the chat, for those of you that are trying to figure that out, or maybe you have something, but you're trying to make it better. Some of the things I mentioned to you today, you can start having those conversations without a third-party tool, right? You can leverage your trusted partners at Creospark to help you get started. But something I'll call out, and I'm very proud to represent Orchestry today, is you can absolutely have some conversations about what do our users need? How do they work? Because we all know governance question number one is when do I use what? And that can be tricky because if I'm in finance and accounting, I may be an expert on contracts. I might be an expert on Excel. Goodness knows, Joy Apple is not an expert on Excel. But I know my job and I know what I need to do. But that doesn't mean that I know I need a team with the SharePoint site and I need specific channels. Do I know what a channel is with tabs and resources? I know I need a way to track tasks, but I may not know that that means planner. One of the wonderful things you can do, and something I really like about Orchestry, is we can put together templates. And as you see on this screen, you can have many, many templates to meet the needs of the different way our groups, our departments, our teams work inside of Microsoft 365. So this is a live demo environment. Let's see if anyone's using my internal project workspace. Okay, they're not. I'm kind of glad because this is my favorite one to look at. Notice what I'm doing here is I'm creating information, and I'll show you what the output of this screen looks like in just a minute. But I'm saying, hey, do you need a team? No, no, no. Do you need a place to manage an internal project that's going to provide all the features you need, including tasks, documents, contacts, communications? This is for project management for internal stakeholders, right? Already the barrier to entry is minimal. Then some things I can do because in a perfect world, right? Governance cradle from the beginning and the creation of the workspace all the way to grave. Some of the things I can then do is have conversations in the business, in the organization, and create policies. Orchestry can help you do this to say, when we're done with this workspace, what should happen to it? Maybe nothing. Maybe we don't know yet, but we at least want to start consistent creation of teams and sites. Wonderful. But maybe if it, let's see here, maybe if it goes inactive for 180 days, the project stalls for 6 months, I can reach out to the owners of that project team and say, hey, do you still need this? If so, you can renew it. If you're done, maybe we could archive that. Right? Start to identify. I love the slide that it might have actually been Carolyn that was presenting on that slide. Garbage in, garbage out. We know that's the truth. It's definitely the truth as AI starts to come into our flow of work. I can also put things in place. My employees, my business users don't have to be experts in governance. We can create those policies, associate them to the workspaces so that governance is a living, breathing thing, that they don't have to read a 500-page manual to know what to do. This one, it's an internal team, which means no guests. So we just disable guest access. But maybe someone got sneaky, or maybe occasionally we bring in a vendor or a trusted partner from Creospark to help us with something. So just in case we go do an admin override, let's at least have a policy in place where if there are guests that show up, let's review them on a scheduled cadence. Because I love working with Res, but when the project's done, we need to make sure we clean up that guest account. I think that's fair. Other things, I'm not going to click on everything on this screen, but other things to think about from a governance lens at the creation of our workspaces. Should there be a minimum number of owners every time a certain type of team or SharePoint site is created? Orchestry can help you enforce that so we don't have any more ownerless workspaces. What if it's a one-to-one? How many times do we see a team where there's one owner, one member? Is that really a team, or could that have been a group chat? We can do some enforcement to make sure set number of owners, minimum number of members, right? Let's go ahead and populate that group. But of course, we don't want that to be cumbersome. Start having those conversations in your organization. What makes sense? We may not know tomorrow that exactly what the membership's going to look like, but it probably shouldn't just be one person today. And once we put all this work together, we go somewhere from Orchestry, and this is where our business users really start to interact with Orchestry. They come to a screen that says, hey, what are you trying to do? Is it this internal project? Here you go. We click that and we take them through some very easy screens. The governance decisions are already made. They don't have to know which archival policy to use, but we will ask them if we have a minimum number of 2 owners enforced to please list those owners, right? So we can take that guesswork away, help them get started. But fear not. Orchestry is not going to override what an owner can do once a team is put in place. Maybe we only ask them for 2 owners today and 2 members, but they can always go in, add to that membership, move people around as needed, right? Work with the users, but put the fence around the backyard so there's safety, there's security, it's managed, and it's maintained. Now, we mentioned archivals. I'm not gonna put you through a laborious demonstration and step through. So I have a fun little video here. At least I think it's fun, because if we're going to keep our environment clean, we don't want Copilot informing our data set with content that's out of date. But how does it know it's out of date if it's still available, right? So what we can do is put some of these policies I referred to in place. So here, this is what it would look like to create a brand new policy. We give it a meaningful name that only people that are admins on this side of Orchestry would see, not our users. So this is going to archive in place. We're going to create it for a team. And then I can figure what that looks like. So archive in place means by default, nothing's going to get deleted. And I'm going to set it to trigger at 90 days. Think on this one, we're going to give the option to delete. It doesn't mean you have to let people delete. I know that's a very scary word. And then we have options. Are we going to set the team to archive? Are we going to remove this site from the search scope, which means Copilot will not be able to action on it once I remove it from the search index, right? It's all working off of the graph. Do I want to prune versions or archive all the versions? Do I want to pull members and guests away once it's archived and just let the owners have access? Maybe I change that around altogether. When this executes, probably want to get buy-in from somebody, right? So we can set that all up and then associate that policy to the workspaces where it's appropriate. This is showing how to do that on a one-by-one basis. We absolutely give you the ability to do this through an API or through our reports in bulk. Okay, I'm going to pause that one and go to one more quick example. I think we're doing good on time. And of course, it started over. There it is. This is a slightly different version of an archive. The first one was archive in place, where it stays in SharePoint, stays in Teams. We can manage permissions, the search scope, to make sure that search and Copilot aren't actioning on the content. Sometimes we want to be a little bit more robust. We want to set up a SharePoint site that houses content that's been archived. So Move to SharePoint does exactly that. We'll delete the team, the group, the site, just bundle up the contents and put it to a SharePoint site that you pick. This one, we've created one just called Project Archive. And then each policy, you could choose to go to a different document library when you archive. We're going to rename the group in this example so it says that it's archived. You don't have to guess. And then the output of that on the archive site looks like this. I'm going to pause for a moment because I think it's important to remind ourselves we've deleted the group. The group recycle bin deletes after about 30 days. I think it's exactly 30 days. Whoever is owners or members, hopefully not guests, of our archive site, that's who then has access to this archived content. You could choose to have a project archive and then a library per type of project. If you wanted to get granular on permissions, I'm not a huge fan of that. You could do that at the document library level. So again, this is a SharePoint site. You have some control over it, and you can have multiple archive sites depending on what your information architecture needs to be. Okay, so I'll let the demo keep running. I talk more than the video. All right, I'm going to pop open one of those folders to see this is how Orchestry is organizing the content that was in channels inside of the team. All right, excellent. One more thing I'll show, as Rez and Carolyn mentioned, governance needs to start at the beginning, follow through, but then you also need to maintain. Something I'm very proud that we can help you do at Orchestry is stay aware of the things that are happening inside of your organization. One of the ways we do that is through our recommendations. So today we're talking a lot about Copilot and governance, which is really AI readiness, right? We know that's just governance. Orchestry has 47 unique recommendations that it's scanning your environment every day. Some of those recommendations are saying, hey, you've got some guests from domains that you blocked, but they're still here. You might want to do something about that. Security. We can call out if your secure score is maybe a little lower than where it should be for an organization of your size and your industry. We can also help you specifically zero in on the things that can help you get Copilot ready. Like perhaps we have unsafe default sharing links. You've got anyone links turned on. We can give you information about kind of why we think that's a big deal, why you should care about that. I'm going to point you to some resources to help you learn more about that if you need to. But we can also take you to the admin center and help you action that recommendation. If you're thinking about workspaces, which is what Orchestry calls teams and sites that you have in your environment, well, goodness gracious, in my demo environment here, Orchestry is telling me I have almost 5,000 workspaces that are overly permissive. I probably want to take a look at that. That sounds like a big deal. So if there's an Orchestry report, we can have that easy, clickable access to it, where we could start working through these workspaces to address the fact that we've got these anyone sharing links present inside of your environment. All right, Rez, and I will turn this back over to you. Is there any particular Orchestry feature that's your favorite you want me to show before I stop sharing my screen?
I think guest management might be a cool one.
I love guest management. How many of us think we've turned off guest access, but lo and behold, there are guests. Have you ever had that happen when you're working with customers, Rez or Carolyn?
Most definitely.
What's interesting is I've been on demos with customers that have newly installed Orchestry, and they're like, wait, no, we've got that off, but yet we have guests. What's interesting is a lot of time these guests, and here I could click this, and I could see who they are and where they're coming from. But sometimes we see somebody like Raina O'Neill, who's a guest from Orchestry, but it says 0 groups. That means is someone has shared something with this guest through a link to a document or a folder. So we can definitely help you kind of put your arms around that variety of scenarios to go, okay, we have guests that are coming in from a variety of locations. I can come and see what are those domains that my guests are coming from. Maybe we see a lot of live.com or Gmail or Hotmail, maybe even AOL.com, where we make a decision. Probably shouldn't be sharing things with people's personal email addresses. So you have that conversation internally to say, okay, What are the domains we should allow? And what are the domains we should block? I've had conversations with customers who realize they have competitors in their environment. What do we do about that? Well, we block them in intra, intra, Azure, however you prefer to still call that. And then we make Orchestra aware so we can't invite them in anymore. Then we come and we pull up our access violations report. Like this Chris guy, he's never redeemed his invitation. That's easy for me. It's been over a month. I'm just going to come in and remove that from Azure. I could do that on a one-by-one basis. I could come in, I could see this Raina's in from a block domain. I could go pull that out as well. Or I can create policies in my environment. Guest requests, policies, where I can configure them in such a way, tie it to the front end. So during the request process, I need to create a thing. When I go to request a guest, I can ask for information. Who is this guest? Where do they work? What's their job title? Maybe I want to know their country. If I'm in Europe, that could be a really big deal. I could capture this information, write it to their intra Azure record, so my guests are always known in the environment. And at this point, if I start to enter in a guest email address that's from live.com, I've blocked that personal domain. My requester, my employee, is going to get a very nice message. So sorry, but you're trying to invite someone from a block domain. So they know at the start, oh, I need to get their work email to be able to share this. You pin that again. So every time I see my guest, I know that they're a guest and where they're a guest from. But notice this is very configurable. You have options, and it lets you make sure at the beginning we know who our guests are. We know where they're coming from. And then I can review. I can attach a guest review policy to a workspace. So this particular one says every 90 days, but we have options. On a fixed schedule, I can ask my workspace owners, or I could even assign this to maybe specific users like an IT security group, a compliance team, to review the guests in whatever workspaces this policy is associated with, make sure they should still be here. If they should, we renew them. Awesome. If they shouldn't, we can remove them from the workspace. And it's kind of like unfriending someone on Facebook. They don't get a notification. They don't know what's happened. But if they happen to find that email they haven't clicked on in 6 months, they click on it, they'll get an access denied, and they can just reach out to their point of contact and say, oh, this isn't working. Can you give me access? Right? And then that decision can happen according to policies and governance. So it really starts to give you a way to manage not just the creation of content, but what happens to the content while it's here, and then what's going to happen to the content when we're done with it. Because we don't need Copilot bringing us data from reports that haven't been valid for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, or the cafeteria menu from 1998 because it was a good lunch day, right? And while we're here, I'll mention things are coming very soon where you'll also be able to do a workspace review. So it's not just Cradle, not just Grave, but it's the things we need to keep in mind throughout the life cycle of a team. Maybe I need to go jettison some versions. So maybe instead of keeping 500 versions of every document in every library, we could put some policies in place that say we're going to clean it up either by date or by a certain number. And we could validate the group membership. Maybe I've got an owner that's retiring, so I need to promote someone from the members group to now be the owner. And as you can see, we have more things that are coming very soon. It's an exciting time in governance. It's an exciting time at Orchestra to really be able to help folks wrap their arms around what should governance be for my company. Rez, I believe you said it earlier, it's a little bit different for every organization because the culture is different. But I would say one thing that is consistent across companies, across industries, is that if your governance is not automated in some way where it helps take that burden off of the employees and off of the business users, it's not going to be particularly successful. So if you automate it, make it living and breathing, let it make sense, where it's not blocking work. It's actually enhancing productivity because now everything just works in a clean, refined, and secure environment.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was fantastic. So we'll share the deck to close it off. Okay, great. Right now what we'll do is maybe what we'll do is go to our Q&A, and I already saw some questions pop up that I'm sure Joy is going to be excited to answer, but is this recording going to be shared? Yes, it will. We are going to be posting it up on our YouTube channel very soon, and you'll probably get a link to it. The next question is, what would you recommend for an agency working with in the vulnerable sector whose current use of AI is to search for ideas, proofread write-ups? And we have removed entering personal information such as name, date of birth, etc. Why don't we start with Carolyn? If you have any thoughts to that, or Joy, if you're thinking it.
I think for that one is really putting just not necessarily the technical governance on the Microsoft 365 side, but at least starting to have conversations about how your organization will allow team members to use AI and putting some guardrails in place so that everybody's kind of clear.
Yeah. Okay. Joy, what do you think?
I agree. Having those guardrails in place is very, very important. One thing I will say, as you're maybe dipping your toes in the water of AI, if you do like a controlled rollout in cohorts within your departments, you'll get really good experience instead of like, we're going to pick 10 random people. But yeah, putting the governance in place first, it's just easier than trying to put the horses back in the barn.
Yeah, what I will do is try to take advantage of the capabilities that are built into the platform, especially when it comes to personal information and PII, and use things like the capabilities in Purview, such as data loss prevention, as well as sensitivity labels, to be able to tag your content. So it's from a Copilot use perspective, it'll be secured to the rules that you're setting up in Purview as well from a technical perspective. So it cannot be surfaced by Copilot at all. And so that's kind of a recommendation that I would say. So the next question is, what if the company is using many systems that are keeping data outside of SharePoint? For example, Confluence. Joy, go for it.
It's a little tricky because I live in that situation as well. If the company is using many systems, including, yes, my company uses Confluence a lot because we are a company of engineers, and they love their Confluence. This is where you need to have conversations about what AI tools will the organization support and what does security look like. Because for Copilot to work, it needs to be an M365. Now, I do know there are some
connectors.
You can connect your Confluence into the graph. I have not been able to leverage that yet at Orchestra. I say yet because I bring this conversation up about every 30 days. So Rez, you may be able to speak more intelligently to how successful that can be.
Yeah, I think you could start looking at graph connectors to index the data in those different environments and surface them up throughout your M365 experience and your search experience as to whether they're going to be tied with Copilot, there's probably a little bit of work there you're going to need to do to extend that using APIs and such. But definitely, if you're looking to leverage that stuff with Copilot and AI, that's kind of an area we specialize in. So I would reach out to us after the fact.
And also having a conversation, is that information in Confluence, is that needed, right? Like have that conversation first before just looking to pull in every connector.
Yeah, that's
fair.
Perfect. Another question, what would be the bare minimum roles within Purview that would need to be assigned to a Teams admin so they could effectively govern Teams and Copilot in a well-rounded manner? Okay, that question is going to take a little bit of looking at the at the roles available. So why don't we see if we can answer that afterwards? We'll see if Prem will take the person's name who asked that, and we'll see if we can get back to you. But I don't know offhand. That'd probably be something we need to look up or ask. So. Now, this one is a good question. Hello, do you think AI will in time update itself to governance policy faster than businesses can? Perhaps it will notify business owners about updates and that it has completed the update. From there, business owners can verify each update to confirm themselves. Interesting. What do you think, Joy?
I think it will happen. I do. But now, machine learning is an interesting thing. So how much will we have to teach the AI before it starts knowing, oh, I saw that this happened. Hey, HR just published a new document. Y'all need to know about it. You know, that kind of thing. But yes, I do think, I think we are going to see opportunities for AI to be a little bit more than just something we go talk to, that it will come talk with us. Now, have I heard any like when, where, and hows about that? No, I haven't. But there are those conversations out there.
Good. No, for sure. Great. And then I saw a question in the chat, and then not the Q&A about how can we optimize our SharePoint storage? Maybe I'll start with that. We're running into, many of our clients are running into capacity constraints, and especially with the cost of the amount of tenant storage you get on your Microsoft tenant, and exceeding that, because Microsoft's being a little bit more stringent on that. And there's many ways to do it, and I'll let Joy talk about some of the capabilities that Orchestry can help here. But there's third-party products, archiving products, there's Microsoft 365 backup and archive, there's retention rules, there's Joy showed earlier the version control limits, and there's many different options there, and you should definitely start thinking about that, because capacity is something you should plan for the long run. Before we pass it off to Joy, Carolyn, do you want to add something?
I'm good with that.
Okay, Joy, how about Orchestry? How can you guys help there?
Oh, we have ways. So, true story. I had a customer that wasn't using archive yet, right? Because you grow into governance, and the word archive can terrify your business users, right? Because they think, oh, IT is going to come just delete things. I mean, it's happened, but not with Orchestry, right? You have the conversation, you put the policies in place. But I do know IT admins that are a little click happy sometimes. But he was asking me, is there a way to regain some storage, because I'm having to pay Microsoft more money every month? And I know Microsoft is not a not-for-profit organization, but we need to keep some of our budget. So we showed him how, if he would start utilizing, even if it's just archive in place, prune the versions. Do you maybe need to keep every version that was ever published? So every previous major version and the currently published one, and just get rid of the drafts, the things that really no one ever saw. Or maybe you could get by with just the currently published major version and prune off everything else. Within 6 weeks, he was not having to write an extra check to Microsoft. It was really a big deal. So just doing that, and our workspace reviews functionality will let you be able to do that during the life of your workspace. You won't have to wait until an archival option. So we're very excited about that. But I would also say, don't be afraid to delete when it's appropriate. So we have a lot of organizations out there that, out of fear of deletion, put a blanket no delete policy on their environment. If you are in that sensitive of an organization or an industry, you need a backup utility. And then let people delete what they know is garbage. When it's time to let it go, let it go. You can use archive as a holding tank. Archive in place for a year. Maybe after that, do more robust archive. Put it off to third-party storage. There are ways you can honor your retention policies, but still clean up and save space.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joy. With that, please, everybody, I know you stayed till the end of today's webinar. Let's get your phones out, scan the QR code, or go to that URL and take our quick survey to be entered to win a $50 Amazon gift card. With that, I will, once again, we appreciate your participation in today's webinar. Keep an eye on your inbox for a recording of today's session, a certificate, some handouts, and we look forward to seeing you again in next month's webinar session. And we want to leave you with some resources in terms of events that are happening. Stephen in the chat has given you some of the stuff that we're doing. We're also we run training in a day sessions. So stay tuned with our website and you'll be able to see all of the things we're hosting. And Joy and I will also be at Microsoft 365 Community Conference in Vegas in May. So I will be doing a session on SharePoint agents and SharePoint Premium. Joy, what are you doing?
I'm doing a community session on how to stay up to date with all the changes coming out from Microsoft, like the Service Center. And then David Francoeur from Orchestra and I are doing a technical session on, security, oversharing, AI, those little topics that seem to be popping up.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much, Joy, Carolyn,
Thank
team, for joining us and everybody on the webinar. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.